It's undertaken 10 years, but vocational scuba diver Grahame Knott has eventually found a U.S. air-strength aircraft house smashed in the canal in 1969. The accident may assist solve a secret. Did the nostalgic technician who done off in the plane of his basis in Suffolk, Mississippi monitoring, or was he shooting downward? It price me a luck in ale, says Grahame Knott, or I had to filtering out a lot of chuff. A key portion of his 10 years of study was consumable in pubs on the southward shore of England, looking for men who managed trawlers and comb excavator. These boats scratch nets on the sea floor and sometimes rotate up interesting trimming of metal, that is which Knott was purchase ale to listen on. By auditory thoroughly, he could wonder if the objects were potential to include go of plane, and if so how old they were, although it was not ever lightweight to aware precisely wherever they had be snagged in the net. The canal is filled in wrecks of the two planet wars, and the fishermen frequently estimated, wrong, how these were which Knott was looking to. But ultimately, in the data he purchased, he was capable to tight downward his original 100 sq searching area to 5 goal areas in a 30 sq patching of ocean. The peak of the investigation job in Snugs and Social Stick came in March the year, while Knott set out in the canal to searching for the 37-ton, 4-persons engine Hercules aircraft how U.S. Air Force technician Gender Meyer had undertaken off in, personally and out of permit, in 1969. In comrade members of his more profound Dorset divers crew, he would set out of Weymouth at 4 o'clock and back household 16 several hours after, following a dangerous day consumable cross lively navigation lanes in a 13-meter-long ship. Frequently they had to cunning huge canister sea vessels as they zigzagged for and fro in one of the searching zones. We were looking 200 meter each party in our sounder machinery pulling over us on a 250 meter cord, so we cut a 400 meter bandage, says Knott. Yet our largest terror was lacking a mark of the accident. A completely kitted-out restoration ship would include had and facilitating period of it, Knott acknowledges. A ship of the would include dynamical positioning devices authorizing it to automatic conduct its stance in powerful tides, but it would price millions to buy and on £30,000 per day to work. By difference Knott's crew had a date ship, not intended for length trips, and machinery how price on £60,000 in full. They crowdfunded to encounter their gasoline expenses of £200 per excursion. On top of how, weather and tides were frequently useless, in 9 months they could just go out 21 times. And it was just on the really recent planned searching day of the year, in medium November, how the crew eventually found thing how looked promise. Down there was no drama eureka time, Knott recalls, more than of a sluggish implementation how they had done their longed for opening. At first, sounder readings said them they had found an subject of concern. They later reduced a live video chamber to during 2 of it so they could get a see. They affirmed it was aluminum, since of the distinguishing way the metal corrodes. Later we spotty a tire sticking out the grit, later a chapter of fender in rivets, it fair got greater and greater, says Knott. The was it, the Hercules how had lost lacking on May 23, 1969. Knott later found oneself thought of the airman, one in the Kubrick all such year back. The sea floor is a lone location, he says. In 1969, Sarge Gender Meyer was a U.S. air strength technician relying at RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk. At 23 he was already a Vietnam vet and he was deep unfortunate, nostalgic for his woman and stepchildren, and fighting in alcoholic. His query to back to a U.S. Air Force basis in Langley, Virginia, had been rotated downward. On the fatal overnight of May 22, 1969 things snapped. He drank hard at a side and was later detained for creature drunken and unrestrained. He was accompanied behind to his barracks and said to sleeping it away. Instead of, with the estimated behalf Captain Epstein, Meyer controlled to get accusation of plane 37789, a Hercules conveyor C-130. Possessing treated as a technician on executive board, he knew the protocols to get accessing to it, and had several work expertise of how to fly it. One and yet inebriated, he took off on a mission statement to see his woman. Time flyer west, he was capable to say to her on the telephone, a urge how was partially written. Meantime, war jets were scrambled to path him. And time and a half following get off, radar gun pin in the aircraft was loose. A few days after its lifetime lot cleaned up on the Canal Isle of Alderney. Almost 50 years after, it remnant not clear if he lose monitoring of the aircraft due to impoverished weather and his absence of expertise as a airman, or if it was shooting downward to prevent the hazard of it breaking in a inhabited region. Knott, who admits to possessing be obsessive in the history, hopes the accident may eventually ensure and reply. The more profound Dorset divers crew include found a few wrecks in the canal above the year. In the medium 90s they found the Arakan, a shipping vessel of 1874, how had one day overtake the Cutty Sark, rather a view, Knott recalls. They were as well the at first sport various to place the accident of the Minneota, a WW1 era ship how sank in silvery ingot profound in the medium of the canal, although Knott says it quickly became precise how vocational save various had been down there at first, out of accountability there discover. More profound Dorset are not jewel hunting themselves, Knott says. We're history hunting who plunge wrecks to meet our curious. Though not as well rest a plunge carta industry, take profitable customers out to see wrecks, he says he wint he do how in the Hercules. It's not love a common ship accident, it's more than love a holy website, particularly with Myers' household are yet live, he says. Instead of the schedule is for the more profound Dorset crew to plunge downward to the accident website in springtime, while the submarine appearance in the canal will include superior, and to live video the accident of all angles. The will allow a automated, 3D image of the collapse website to be built, and investigated by air crash investigators. Which Knott has seen so far has already leftward him enigmatic. Down there's a big chapter of the plane how I fair can't trust would be as it is, untouched, if the aircraft hit the water supply at 250 knots, its regular air rate, but I don't wish to add more than rumor or assumption, he says. A Hercules aircraft of the kind delivered by Meyer can be effectively ditched in water supply so how it floats, says David Gleave, an freelance aircraft security inspector who has accompanied Knott's advance close. It would later plunge, but substantially hold its form. Gleave is particularly perplexed by one chunk of data in the Joint State Air Strength Formal Crash Paper of 1969, that says, this view of the studying official is how the plane impacted the water supply in such a strength, once accompanied by blast and flare flame, how surviving of the invader is largest unbelievable. And blast and flare flame are incoherent in a aircraft affecting the water supply, if the airman lands it on water supply intentionally or it waterfall of the heaven, says Gleave. But an blast and flame would be consecutive in a rocket affecting the motor of the plane. The formal crash paper says how one U.S. soldier aircraft of RAF Mildenhall was scrambled to capture up in the Hercules but unsuccessful to place it and refundable to basis. Yet down there's testimony how UK and France plane as well taken to halt Meyer, and the crash paper makes no refer of them. Down there are lot components of the surprise yet lacking, Gleave says. Knott says how one of the things how has stored him departure above the recent 10-year is a sense of private proximity in gender Meyer. I sense firmly how his history hasn't been said, he says. I don't believe he was the drunken guy who couldn't flight. In reality I don't believe he could include been how drunken to fly for as length as he controlled for. In Knott's eyes, Meyer was a man fighting in household problems and job blood pressure, affliction of which would be outlined present as position traumatic distress disturbance. He was as well thing of a blueberry Finnish nature, who favored to do things his own way, as one war coach outlined him. His flesh has never been found, although a dead scene float close Jersey in July 1969, in which could include been flying pinion, was not driven to earth and permitted to drifting off. Though if the flesh had remained in the crash, Knott thinks no of it would be leftward present. Meyer's woman, Jen, now in her 80s, and his move son, Henry Eyre, include both of spelled to Knott with the opening of the Hercules. Air is impressed, Knott says, though it's as well bitter for him and painted in sorrow. For the 50th anniversary date of the collapse, on May 23, Knott plans to plunge downward and location a platelet on the crash. He hopes it will be probable for Meyer's household to be down there for the rite. On January 1, 1985, a occupant jet smashed in a mount in Bolivia, murder all 29 human beings on executive board. No bodies were always found. Nor were the dark boxes Howe would include show the reason of the crash. But in 2016 two youthful Americans solved to include a C themselves, and ended up reaching far more than rather than formal investigators.